Hello, members of the most illustrious fantasy football league, Eagle Point Butts. It is I, your commissioner and 1-2-3-time undisputed champion, JC Callahan, coming at you live from HQ after another fantastic week of fantasy football. Some nail-biting games. Another great America's Game of the Week coming down to the wire on Monday between Tim and Brandon, with Tim asserting his dominance over Brandon. And then, lo and behold, the commissioner remaining undefeated through 3 weeks. Champ did, unfortunately, weasel me out of the top-scoring team in the league by one little point, but can't complain. The flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. I'm going to try to get through these power rankings a little bit faster because Brendan has told me how long these videos are, and also that he's a little upset that I used the victim card since he is a couple of protected classes in this league. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to message me, and I can tell you what protected classes he, of course, is. But he was a little hurt that I would use the victim card instead of him in the most recent video. So the investigation, of course, is still underway. I would love to give some more information about it, but I am allowing the investigation to go forward and justice to be done. But with no further ado, let's get right into the power rankings for this week. And starting off in the number one spot, once again, no surprise here, it is the commissioner's team, still the only undefeated team left in the league. I really thought last week was going to be the week when I was playing Tyler that streak would end, but we are still here. We won a real nail biter against Tyler. I don't know if you all watched that Bills game, but gosh, I was just praying for it to end. The Bills were absolutely having their way with the Jaguars. The last two drives, the Jaguars had their backups in. One almost resulted in a scoop and score for the Bills, and then the second drive almost resulted in a pick six for the Bills. Both would have ended the streak, but we continue through week 3. And this Frankenstein of a team here that I have going on, I don't know. Once again, I don't know how we're still 3-0, but we are 3-0. Sam Darnold, QB top 5 this year. Crazy. Who would have thought? Cam Akers coming in and putting up points, desperately needed those points because Devon Achane really got bottled up in Seattle, and that's not going to be something that's probably changing anytime soon because they don't have a quarterback in Miami, and so they're just going to load that dang box against Achane. DK looking great. Positives for Chase is that I knew my receiver core could carry me through in this game. I just needed some points, and DK and Rashee Rice both big positives through the first 3 weeks of the year. Rashee Rice has been so consistent. You just hope they both can stay healthy because health is a real question mark with this team. I feel like as soon as I get that one loss, I'm going to be falling way down in the power rankings because of health. Negatives, really thin at running back right now. I'm just picking people up and trying to put them in. CD and Dak had a spat this week, but that means he probably will have a big week coming up against the Giants, so I'm excited about that. My tight ends only played okay, but that's how tight ends have been this year. And so I might start hitting people up for some trades on the tight end side of things because I do have 2 of the premier tight ends in this league. And until Pacheco or Brooks come off the IR, Brooks might come back pretty soon because week 4 people can start coming off that the NFL excused list. But I need some help at running back. My wide receivers are deep. My tight ends are deep. Need help at running back. But still number 1 just because I'm undefeated. And I'm only 1 point off from being still the most prolific scorer this year. Champ took that crown from me by 1 point. But my DMs are open. So let's make a deal. Let's make a deal, people. And in the number 2 spot this week, 1 place up from last week when he was 3rd. Now the most prolific scorer in this league, the Victoria's Secret. Top scoring team, like I said, he's got me by 1 point. But Champ's team is formidable. It is scary. I meant it when I said I was very glad I played him early on and got the win. Because if we play tomorrow, there's no way I'm winning. Kyren Williams absolutely laid it on the 49ers. 49ers are getting banged up, but Kyren Williams is a stud. Positives for Champ. Kyren Williams, Amari Cooper finding the end zone twice. He needed that. Amon-Ra's waking up. Maybe a little bit banged up, but he'll be fine. And Zach Charbonnet had a freaking game against Miami. Champ's putting up big numbers without James Conner producing and without CJ Stroud really producing yet this year. Top to bottom, this is a very formidable team with a deep bench as well. Negatives for Champ. His wide receivers, still a little suspect. Devontae is in a tough offense, and so is Amari Cooper. They force-fed him, and so We'll see what happens there. That's the only issues that I think Champ has. This team, top to bottom, is a competitor, and it's going to be scary this year. So Champ, well deserving of that 2 spot this week. And then in the 3 spot this week, somebody who won his game and then actually dropped a position. That's what you get for winning, I guess. Is Tim, and really the only reason he went down a peg is because Champ is now the top scoring team in this league. Tim really could have gone 2 or 3. It was purely a point reason thing because this is just another scary balanced team in this league. You look at Tim's team top to bottom. He's putting up good points with Josh Jacobs still not finding the end zone yet. Tyreek Hill only putting up 4 points, and they don't have a quarterback in Miami right now, and so that's really hurting him. Dalton Schultz, Tim is getting 0 really production out of the tight end spot, but he's got such heavy hitters on this team. Jahmyr Gibbs, great game. Nico Collins is going to continue to produce. Malik Neighbors is just throwing parties on people. I'll be interested to see how he does against actually good teams, but looks like an absolute stud this year. And once George Kittle comes back, Tim top to bottom is just going to be very balanced and in a very good spot. Not to mention Jaden Daniels. And so negatives for Tim, Josh Jacobs still hasn't found the end zone. Tyreek doesn't have a quarterback and Kittle's out, so he doesn't have a tight end. But Tim's going to be just fine. His team is definitely formidable enough to keep winning without those pieces. And like Champs is going to be really scary to play this year, Tim is going to be very scary to play this year. I don't want to see him in the postseason because his team is very good. I think if it wasn't for me being undefeated, the power rankings might look like Champ or Tim in the 1 and 2 spot, and then maybe me in the 3 spot. I guess we'll have to see if I win this week. We'll see. All right, and in the 4 spot, all the way up from the 9 spot last week, we have Bert's Butts, who put up a strong performance, really a great win against Mike, keeping him from going 1 and 2, and Mike going 1 and 2. 2 and 1 is a lot better of a feeling. Somehow the Bills look better without freaking Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. It's like Josh Allen and his friends are just going out there and balling out. And I love to see it. It's really, really fun to watch. They're boat racing every team. And so you got to hope that there are some teams that can keep up so Josh Allen can put 31 points on the board. Otherwise, it'll be like the Miami game where he's putting up 9 or 10 because they just don't really need him. Positives for Bert. Man, if Josh Allen can put up 30 points a game, Bert's going to win a lot of games because that is a massive game changer. Other positives, David Montgomery had a really good game, and so did Jahmyr Gibbs. Marvin Harrison Jr., let's check in on him.
But look at the rookie here. Here he goes, and everybody leaves him, and nobody.
All right, not a bad week at all for Marvin Harrison Jr. Let's see where he's at on the yard side of things. 16 overall with 198 yards over the first 3 games of the year. Not too bad at all. What about with targets? Targets. 21 overall with 22 targets. Not the worst. Although I see some names down here that he really shouldn't be around. And then heading over to receptions. Where is he at on receptions? Let's control F this bad boy. Not in the top 50. .62 on receptions. So needs to get those receptions number up. But again, not the worst. Let's look at touchdowns because I bet he's going to be in a good spot with the touchdowns. Yeah, look at that. He's got 3 touchdowns. Great start for Marvin Harrison Jr. after a really shaky week 1. I mean, if you think of it, the season as 2 weeks for him, that's really solid for 2 weeks. Can't wait to see where he's at in week 4. All right, and then negatives for Bert. Brandon Ayuk still does not look like he's in football shape. And the 49ers are really struggling health-wise. You would think Brandon Ayuk would take the next step forward and really become the dominant number 1. He's not done that. Juwan Jennings got all the touches last week. And then Jordan Mason is starting to show why Christian McCaffrey is the RB1 in San Fran. Not the worst game, 8.8 points is plenty of production. But man, if Josh Allen isn't putting up 30 points and Jordan Mason's only putting up 8 points and in place of what Christian McCaffrey would be putting up, that's going to be a little tough for Burt, especially because Brandon Ayuk is not performing. Also, Rachaad White splitting more and more touches with Bucky Irving, who Burt did get in front of me on the waivers because I did try to pick up Bucky Irving. That's going to be a tough situation because you don't know who's going to get more touches if they keep giving more touches to Bucky Irving. So that's also a little bit of a negative. But you know what? Great week for Burt. Again, if Josh Allen's putting up 30 points, he's going to win a lot of games. Marvin Harrison Jr. is still looking good. So good for Burt. Well deserving of that 4 spot this week. All right, then in the 5 spot this week, up 1 spot from last week, we have the proud owner and operator of Brennan's Buttholes, Brennan the Biz himself, getting a big win over the 4-time undisputed champion ZP3. Injuries catching up to ZP3, and Brennan kind of sneaking away with the victory here because definitely some positives out of his team, but some pretty big negatives as well. Starting with the positives, Derrick Henry and Breece Hall, they're going to win him games on their own. They basically did that this week. Derrick Henry having just a monster week against my Cowboys and Breece Hall having a good week against the Patriots. The only thing with Breece Hall is you wonder how much Braylon Allen might eat into what he's trying to do, but I don't think it's going to be too much because the Jets are going to be pretty run heavy and then let Aaron Rodgers create as he wants to. Other positives, Drake London, another good game. Going over to the negatives, there are some negatives. Anthony Richardson playing a good defense does not do well. So he might become more matchup dependent because, like I said in week 1, not really sold on him. The passing yards and the touchdowns he had that week were from long shots that aren't going to be open on good defenses, and the Bears have a pretty good defense. And so he really didn't have a good game. Zay Flowers wasn't needed against the Cowboys, and so they didn't really utilize him. And thankfully for Brennan, he did not lose because Chris Olave was on his bench. He may not like me saying this, I probably would have roasted him a little bit if he lost and Chris Olave was the difference, because Chris Olave should be playing probably over either Brian Thomas or Zay Flowers, probably Brian Thomas, because the Jaguars have not looked good, and Chris Olave is the number 1 wide receiver in New Orleans, and last week he didn't have a bad week. He put up 8 points, and it looked like they were getting him the ball more. He's playing in a suspect Philly defense in the secondary, and Brian Thomas is going up against a very good Buffalo defense. And so I think Chris Olave should have been the play, but thankfully didn't matter. Brennan won anyways because of his running backs, which is going to happen a lot this week. And then Brennan's looking for production out of the tight end spot. So if you're feeling trade happy, Brennan, give me a call, although you may not want to after what I just said about your playing of Brian Thomas over Chris Olave. But yeah, I think Brennan's in a good spot. We'll see how the season goes. Again, his success is going to depend on Drake London and Chris Olave and Zay Flowers really solidifying themselves as a wide receiver 1 talent to help him with his running backs as well. But well deserving of the 5 spot this week is Brennan. And then in the 6th spot this week, we have Mucho Mondo's Brandon, who almost had a Monday Night Miracle comeback. His team scored over 60 points just on Monday night, which is wild. Unfortunately for him, he also had some players lay an egg, and Tim had Joe Burrow throwing the ball to Jamar Chase. So tough for Brandon. He didn't have a bad week, and I think he's going to continue to rise in the rankings. He just played against Tim, who also has a very good team, and Brandon has some goose eggs on the board. Let's take a look at what's going on. Positives for Brandon. Jamar Chase season is here. He looked fantastic against the Commanders, and I'm hoping he can continue to produce like that because I want the Bengals to be in the thick of things. Scary Terry, dog. What a game from Scary Terry. James Cook could have had a lot more points, but they didn't really need him again. Negatives for Brandon. Ramondre Stevenson. Oof, tough game. You got to get more than 0.3 out of Ramondre. You got to get more than 0.4 out of your tight end spot. The Isaiah Likely 0.4 is kind of crazy when you think that Mark Andrews only got one target that whole game. So they're not throwing to their tight ends. They were just letting Derrick Henry eat, which isn't good for freaking Isaiah Likely or Mark Andrews. And the Chicago offense looks bad. It just looks bad. But Brandon's got some depth on the bench. Jalen Naylor. I don't remember how to pronounce this guy. I think it's Yosivas or something like that. Great game. And then Devin Singletary sneakily having a great game as well. He could definitely be a fun flex play against bad teams. And Dallas Goedert with 170 receiving yards. And if A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith miss more time, that's going to be a very good thing for Brandon because he'll plug him into the tight end and he'll eat. But like I said, I think Brandon's going to continue to rise in the rankings. He's got a good team. Puka will come back later in the season. I think Brandon just needs to hold on for a bit and he'll be just fine. But for now, he's in that 6th spot. All right. And then in the 7th spot this week, we have the 4-time undisputed champion, USDA certified lean ZP3, losing a tough one to Brennan. Again, like I mentioned earlier, the injuries are taking their toll on Zach. We come down here. Joe Mixon, unfortunately, wasn't able to play. He needed him. Debo wasn't able to play. If Joe Mixon and Debo can play, 19-point spread is nothing for them. Positives for Zach. Lamar's balling out. He should put up 20 to 25 a game. Bijan needs more touches. He needs to touch the ball 20 times in Atlanta. I don't understand. I thought Arthur Smith left Atlanta. They're not utilizing him enough. He needs 20 touches a game because he looks like the best running back in the league. Give him 20 touches a game. Gosh darn it. Also, Dalton Kincaid finally waking up is a great sign for Zach out of the tight end position. Unfortunately, there are quite a few negatives. Mike Evans having a tough game against Pat Surtain, who is probably the best cornerback in the league. Mike Evans is not playing against Pat Surtain every week, so that's going to go up. Jalen Waddle doesn't have a quarterback throwing him the ball. And Rashid Shaheed turned back into a pumpkin along with Xavier Worthy. So, tough week for Zach. Again, the injuries. Once Debo and Joe Mixon can come back, he's gonna be just fine. You just hope they can come back sooner rather than later. But on Zach's bench is a sneaky good player in Rome Odunze, who had a massive game against the Colts. And it'll be interesting to see if he becomes Caleb Williams' favorite target because that'll be a big swing in Zach's favor. But for now, he's in the 7th spot, just looking to get healthy and then work his way back up the rankings. All right, and in the 8th spot, we've got Tyler Ridley Dees, who, again, heartbreaking loss. Most people probably weren't watching that Bills-Jags game because of how much of a blowout it was for the Bills. Well, it was not a blowout for Tyler and Chase's game. It was very dicey. My heart was racing. My butt was puckering. I was like plunged to that seat. I couldn't get up, let me tell you. Probably shouldn't say that, but who cares? We're going to come down here to take a look at some positives for Tyler's team. Jonathan Taylor, 2 rushing touchdowns, 110 yards on the ground, and 25 receiving against a very good Chicago defense. The good news for Jonathan Taylor is, as Anthony Richardson continues to be suspect, they're just going to hand the ball more to Jonathan Taylor. As long as he's healthy, he'll be a top 5, probably top 3 running back in this league. He just looked fantastic on Sunday. Almost brought Tyler's team the dub. Alvin Kamara, it's crazy to say 12.7 is a tough week for him because most running backs, you take that. Look, my running backs combined for barely over that. And so Alvin Kamara, it really wasn't a bad week. You just wanted him to find the end zone. And that was the difference in this game. Tyler needed somebody else to find the end zone. Derek Carr has a tough game. J.K. Dobbins gets stymied by a tough Steelers defense. Calvin Ridley, we'll see if he's legit in like the next 4 weeks. I'm still on the fence. Jerry Jeudy, not sure why we're playing him, but those are the negatives. I'm not going to rail on Tyler's team. It was a tough week for him. Really just needed some more production from his receiving core because they are suspect. But Tyler's team has impressed me. I thought it was going to be a lot worse, just being honest. He's made some key pickups. J.K. Dobbins is a very key pickup that could change his season around if he stays healthy. So Tyler's in the 8th spot. Would not surprise me if he climbs up a little bit as the weeks go on. All right, and in the 9 spot, we have Leather Daddy, who, once again, I got to emphasize, last week was 120 seconds away from being 2-0 and now being 2-1 instead of 1-2. Tough break for Luke. And there's still some really bright spots on this team, but there's really like some low lows on this team. So Patrick Mahomes has his best scoring game of the week, of the year so far, which is crazy because it's only 16.38 points. Just hasn't looked himself. Saquon, on the other hand, has looked like an MVP candidate. And if he stays healthy, he's going to be RB1. He's going to be in the MVP consideration. Just looks like an absolute stud, especially with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith out. Him and Dallas Goedert are going to eat. On the flip side, DeAndre Swift, I thought I saw something that was like the Chicago Bears are averaging less than 2 yards per carry as a unit. Not good. DeAndre Swift is getting screwed over by a really bad O-line, and DeAndre Swift isn't really a run between the tackles kind of guy. So that's not good for Luke. Stephon Diggs had an okay game, so I'm not going to talk about Stephon Diggs, but I will talk about Devontae Smith getting his head taken off by a dirty hit on the Saints when he's basically already down and a guy comes up and pops his helmet off of him, and he's in concussion protocol. Hopefully he comes back soon because Luke needs him. Not getting anything out of your tight end spot, and then Jaylen Warren is also injured. So some tough stuff for Luke. It would really help him if Keenan Allen was not MIA and could come back. Because he needs a little shot in the arm. Also, Michael Pittman. Luke spent a lot of draft capital on some players that have not worked out at all. Michael Pittman, Keenan Allen, to name 2. Stephon Diggs has been okay. I will say Stephon Diggs has been better than I thought he would be to start the season. But, man, Luke needs some help. He needs some help. Not sure what to say. Maybe make a trade. See if you can get 2 really good players for Saquon to try to give yourself a shot in the arm. But it would be really helpful if he was 2-1 instead of 1-2. So he needs his wide receivers to step up or it's going to get ugly real quick. And then finally in the 10 spot, once again, we have the gentleman Mike, who I think has a better team than Luke does. He just needs to get a win to climb up the rankings a little bit. I was pretty hard on Mike week 1, but he's also getting screwed pretty hard by a position that he spent some good draft capital on, which is the tight end position. Nobody saw Mark Andrews getting 1 target for 0 receptions against Dallas this year, and his production has just been pitiful. Same with Sam Laporta, who's had awful production and got hurt against Arizona and now has a low ankle sprain. So not the worst injury. We'll see what happens, but Mike spent some pretty high draft capital on those 2 players, and for neither of them to work out really is kneecapping his team right now. We look over here. Jalen Hurts had an okay game against New Orleans. You need more out of Jalen. Aaron Jones continues to look like a stud with Minnesota. He can keep that production going as long as he stays healthy. When he's on the field, he's so exciting to watch. He reminds me so much of Alvin Kamara. Such a good burst, such a good receiving back as well. So underrated. It's just a health concern with him. Jerome Ford, not a great game against the Giants, but 7 points is fine. Darnell Mooney. So Mike might have found a diamond in the rough with Darnell Mooney. Time will tell. Through the first 3 weeks, I think he has production that's definitely surprised me. We got to see it for another 4 weeks to see what he really is. But Justin Jefferson has looked fantastic. Carson Steele had an okay game, but he looked like the dominant back for the Chiefs. Now Kareem Hunt's coming back, and will probably be in the mix this coming week. So I think the biggest positive for Mike is if Andy Dalton plays, Deontay Johnson can come in and revitalize some of this team. But he really needs Deontay Johnson to step up. He needs a tight end to step up. Otherwise, he's going to be relying on Aaron Jones and Justin Jefferson to win him every game, and that's just not going to happen. But like I said, I think his team is actually in a better shape than Luke because A.J. Brown isn't playing. Forgot to mention A.J. Brown. That's such a big hole for Mike. The biggest hole for Mike is A.J. Brown, the Brown hole. Once A.J. Brown comes back, Mike will win games with Aaron Jones, A.J. Brown, and Justin Jefferson. And eventually he'll get some tight end play to match it. But until then, Mike's got to win a game. Who's he playing next week? Playing Brandon. I'm not going to get too into this because I got to put my pick'ems in. Not sure if you guys heard, but I was a perfect 5 for 5 this past week. So I'm not going to give away any information. I know you would love to know the information I have, the metrics, the statistics, the data. We are a data-driven league. that your commissioner has to make these amazing picks. But I'm going to keep it to myself, make the picks, and hope that Mike can bounce back and get his first dub of the year this coming week.
USDA certified lean.
All right, and then finally we have the USDA Certified Lean America's Game of the Week, which is Brennan the Biz and Tim. Tim trying to continue his domination and get a real stranglehold on that division, but little does he know, Brennan's into the strangling. So we'll see what happens. What a couple of great America's Games of the Weeks with Champ and I, and then Brandon and Tim, all living up to the hype. Hopefully this one does this week because Brennan's got some heavy hitters. So Tim better bring everything he's got, better rally the troops, get them riled up. But make sure you thank our sponsors. I hope everybody has just a fantastic week. Looking forward to the games on Sunday. Make sure you go to church on Sunday. It is the Lord's Day, and we need to give him all reverence and praise. So, again, make sure you thank our sponsor, Dominion Voting, for providing us the safest and most certifiable elections of all time. And have a great week, League.